Back to ESPL Boxing's YouTube channel. Delighted as always to be joined by Danny. This is a short preview video for Lee McGregor's fight in Edinburgh on Friday night on Channel 5 against Erik Robles Ayala. Danny, thank you for joining me. Return of Lee McGregor, well, kind of has been seen as kind of a future world champion by a lot of people. Has kind of not had the greatest, most active couple of years in his career, but he's back kind of on a big stage on Friday night in Edinburgh. Hasn't fought in Scotland since the Kash Farouk fight. Give me your thoughts on this fight and what you see happening.
Yeah, look, as seems to be the case with a lot of the fights we preview and a lot of these like IBO world title fights, you see Brits being involved in. Not particularly familiar with Ayala, his opponent. I know he's got a lot of knockouts in Mexico. The level of opponent's not great, but that's not to discount them completely. We've seen obviously Lara come over here unknown, Giovanni Straffon as well, stop Tennyson, but you'd have to make like Lee McGregor a really heavy favourite going into the fight on paper. And I'm excited to see him back. Like people forget about Lee McGregor. Like he won a British title in his 8th fight, European champion in 10 fights, and then just the last 18 months have been a complete disaster. He had that draw against that Diego Ruiz, and to be honest, I remember watching that fight and I thought he was a bit hard done by to get a draw, although he was really, really flat and sort of made the fight close where, you know, you could see that. And then he's one of these fighters, he was signed with Probellum, and then that all went tits up and he's just been left in no man's land. Still only 26, so plenty of time to sort of reach the level he was being tipped for at the start of his career. And I'm looking forward to seeing him back and hopefully, you know, under Wasserman, he can get some sort of momentum back into his career.
Yeah, definitely. I was there that night where he got that draw against Diego Ruiz, and it was a strange one because it was on quite early on in the night. It was in York Hall, so obviously quite a small venue, and there just weren't a lot of people there watching him. I'll be honest, I don't remember what the main event was that night, and it was a flat crowd and a flat performance, and most people thought he did just about enough to win. And it was one of those where it went 10 rounds, but the referee was also the judge, so which kind of is a different story. But I think that to referee 10 rounds and judge them as well, it's difficult. So yeah, it was 5-5 against Diego Ruiz. Obviously, he hasn't rematched Ruiz, which I think's okay personally. And yeah, then didn't fight for the rest of 2022, and yeah, was returned to the ring in March of this year. How highly do you rate Lee McGregor, Danny? I think, as you said, he kind of achieved so much in his career early on. Was kind of had that big fight against Kash Farouk. Is now 12-0 with that one draw that we mentioned. Still fighting at super bantamweight, a weight he's not been at very long. Obviously, had those title fights at bantamweight. Would you consider him to be one of Britain's best kind of young fighters, best fighters who's had, say, less than 15 fights still?
Okay, it does feel harsh to like, because that's a category you would have had him in like a year and a half ago, and based off, you know, one flat performance, which, as I say, I still thought he won, and just inactivity. I suppose you still have to, but it feels as if it's an important night for him on Friday night to, like, as I say, sort of resume that excitement about his career. At 26, like it's obviously not old, but at those lower weight classes, like you're sort of coming into your peak at that age. Like it's not like heavyweights where you see them like sort of being groomed for world title fights at 30, 31. Like it sort of is now or never in terms of making a run in his prime towards a world title. But I still think he could. I mean, maybe a bit of the hype in his early career was a bit over the top, but could still be in world title fights, potentially become a world champion if things fall right for him.
Yeah, no, we'll see what happens. Hopefully, see him return to kind of not just kind of winning fights again, but kind of stopping guys, because he's always been seen as a big punch for the weight. Ayala, I'm not kind of the same as you. Hadn't really heard of him before this fight was announced. 13-1 with 9 stoppages. That one loss came back in 2020, so three and a half years ago now. Only 23 years old, looks a lot older than that, but apparently he's 23. But yeah, he's a Mexican fighter. I think, without sounding too stereotypical, a lot of time we know what Mexican fighters can do. I'm sure he can whack a bit. And yeah, look, he's not lost the fight for a long time, but Lee McGregor's supposed to be seen as kind of a big prospect on these shores. Final question from me, Danny. Big domestic fight coming up in a couple of weeks. Liam Davis against Jason Cunningham, which has the British, the European titles on the line. If I'm not going to ask kind of about Liam McGregor possibly facing the winner of this fight, but where do you kind of rate those guys in terms of the best super bantamweights in Britain? I think a lot. There's Shabazz Masood as well, who's kind of another good undefeated prospect. But who's the best? If someone said to you, put a gun to your head and said, who is the best super bantamweight Britain has to offer, what would your answer be?
Probably Liam Davis at the minute, I would say. I think Mark Leach is a really good fighter, and the way Davis beat him was really impressive. And like, we know the problems Iona Belita can cause people in these shores. Gave Michael Conlan a really tough fight, and Davis beat him in good fashion as well. The Cunningham fight's obviously like going to cement the winner. That's the top super bantamweight on paper anyway in the country. But you mentioned Shabazz Masood, and if it wasn't for them both being with Ben Davison, that would be the fight you would make a lot of sense next. Obviously Masood just signed with Matchroom. McGregor will watch them, and they've got a pretty good relationship. And they I think they're both ranked. Well, I know McGregor's ranked with two of the governing bodies, and Masood's ahead of them in one. But again, just because they're both with Ben Davison, it's a fight that's unlikely, I think. But it's shaping up to be an all right division domestically with the return of McGregor. Masood will match him, and then you'd imagine the loser of Davis Cunningham will struggle, particularly if it's Cunningham. But Liam Davis sort of flying through the ranks as well.
Yeah, definitely. A fight I should have mentioned there is obviously Dennis McCann as well. Fights believed next month. Possibly the best of all. But yeah, there's a lot of talent there. And obviously Liam Davis, Jason Cunningham is a great domestic fight. And Lee McGregor's obviously had his own domestic battle with Cash Farouk early on in his career. So yeah, we'll see if maybe that's that's maybe a route he could go down again. But we'll see. We'll leave it there, Danny. Yeah, but yeah, it's a big fight in terms of Lee McGregor, particularly just because his return to Scotland needs to look good. And I think that if he does look good and does win well, we could see a very big fight for him in the next 12 months, possibly, as you mentioned there, at these kind of lower weights at his age class. You're coming into your peak there. So we'll see what happens. Danny, thank you very much for your time. Looking forward to discussing the fight with you on Friday night. We will see what happens. Thanks again.
All right, mate. Cheers.